And the tax hikes that are proposed in this bill will affect people in almost every single profession. They'll affect tradies, they'll affect our police officers, our nurses, accountants, public servants. These tax changes will hurt all hard-working Australians. Superannuation policy, Deputy Speaker, particularly as we live in a country that has compulsory employer contributions, superannuation policy must reward work. It must assist Australians to have choices in their post-work retirement life.
The question now is that the amendment be agreed to, and I call the honourable member for Hughes.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I rise to speak on the Treasury Laws Amendment, Better Targeted Superannuation Concessions and Other Measures Bill of 2023. And, Deputy Speaker, at the outset, I will be opposing this bill and also the subsequent bill. The bill has a stated intention to reduce the tax concessions on total superannuation balances which exceed $3 million. In effect, Deputy Speaker, what this means is that instead of paying 15%, the existing rate, on balances over $3 million, the tax rate will be doubled. There are three main reasons, Deputy Speaker, that I say that this bill should be opposed. The first is it represents a broken election promise, yet another broken election promise. Secondly, the $3 million threshold figure is not indexed. Thirdly and lastly, it also taxes unrealised capital gains. So, Deputy Speaker, if I turn first of all to the issue that this is a broken promise from the Albanese Labor government. Australians save hard for their retirement. We did not hear a single word during the election campaign of 2022 that said that any changes were going to be brought to superannuation. As a matter of fact, the Prime Minister and other now ministers said that there would be no changes to superannuation. Superannuation is a long-term investment. Australians, hard-working Australians, go and receive financial advice, they go and see their accountants when they make decisions about their superannuation. They are entitled to do that based on promises made by an opposition going into an election campaign that there will be no changes to that superannuation regime. And if we turn and look at the principles of superannuation, superannuation is Australians' money. It's not the government's money, it's our money. It's the money of Australians who have worked hard and have saved, put aside some money. Some of it is compulsory, but there are also many, many Australians who have taken advice for years and have been aspirational and have been told, put aside some money now and then you won't be on the age pension. You won't be a burden to the taxpayer when you get old. And it will also provide you with choice in the sort of retirement that you have. And these principles, when we have a government that comes in and suddenly starts taxing and changing the way that superannuation will be treated, this is a broken promise and it's a broken contract with the Australian people. On our side, Deputy Speaker, we want to encourage people to put money into superannuation. We want to see Australians with more choice about how they can use their retirement savings. And the tax hikes that are proposed in this bill will affect people in almost every single profession. They'll affect tradies, they'll affect our police officers, our nurses, accountants, public servants. These tax changes will hurt all hard-working Australians. Superannuation policy, Deputy Speaker, particularly as we live in a country that has compulsory employer contributions, superannuation policy must reward work. It must assist Australians to have choices in their post-work retirement life. And therefore Australian governments should be extremely cautious about raising tax on Australian super, particularly introducing changes to superannuation that has come as a big surprise after the election of 2022. So I say that these taxes overall will undermine the very principles of superannuation. And if I can turn first of all to one of the most contentious aspects of this bill, Deputy Speaker, is the lack of indexation. And even almost unanimously, all submissions to Treasury when this bill was placed on consultation came back from stakeholders saying indexation, the failure to index the $3 million is a major issue. And because it hasn't been indexed to take account of inflation, to say, well, $3 million today is going to be very different to $3 million in 10, 20 years when we've had successive years of inflation. At this rate, the average 20-year-old today earning an average wage will pay this tax. Now, if this tax was supposed to be directed towards higher income earners, towards people who have a much greater superannuation balance than the average Australian, why then is this government looking at slugging the average 20-year-old? It's simply unfair, and the indexation should be introduced. The other major reason that I will not be supporting this bill is because this represents a taxation of unrealised capital gains. This, Deputy Speaker, violates the principles of the Australian taxation system. Capital gains are always taxed on realised profits, not on accrual. And this is particularly unfair to taxpayers who have placed large illiquid assets, such as a farm or business premises, into their superannuation funds under existing laws and may now lack the sufficient funds to pay this tax. This was particularly an issue that was raised by the National Farmers Federation. They used the example that farmers often do not have they're not on a wage, they're not on a set salary, so sometimes they will move a farm, they'll move premises into their superannuation fund, and this will now be part of a new, much higher tax regime. But the farmer may not have the funds available to pay that tax. So what will happen there, Deputy Speaker? This is a completely unfair attack on farmers. And there are similarly many small businesses that may move some business premises into their superannuation fund for exactly the same reason. Many business people, particularly small business people, do not earn a static wage, a static salary, and so they will look at other ways that they can save for their future, doing it on existing laws, under existing advice from financial advisors and accountants. So again, there'll be many business people impacted by this tax who did not and had no idea about this tax going into the election in 2022. And Deputy Speaker, I mentioned the National Farmers Federation, other stakeholders that were consulted and responded on the draft bill. Particularly relevantly, the Chartered Accountants of Australia and New Zealand said, Mr Tony Negleen came out and said these changes will unfairly impact on people who are in or approaching retirement, people who followed the rules, and are also a tax trap for young players. That's not me saying it, Deputy Speaker. That's the head of the Chartered Accountants of Australia and New Zealand. Then the SMSF Association, Mr Peter Burgess, said taxing unrealised capital gains is a tax on market movements and changes in asset values, not on income. This is an alarming precedent as it represents a fundamental change in how tax policy is implemented in Australia. And so, Deputy Speaker, I just conclude by saying there are three major problems with this bill. It's poorly thought out, it's poorly constructed, it represents yet another broken election promise, it's a fiscal attack on farmers and small businesses. Its failure to introduce indexation means that many Australian workers will be caught up paying this tax, having already made long-term financial decisions. Lastly, Deputy Speaker, taxing unrealised capital gains simply flies in the face of Australian taxation principles. It will particularly impact farmers and our small business people. For all of these reasons, Deputy Speaker, I'll be opposing this bill. Thank you.
I thank the honourable member for Hughes.